Brains. Brains. Nom 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 nom.
While I was away on my self-imposed movie review exile, a sad thing happened. Sir Christopher Lee passed away, and he's an actor that I've always really admired, loved his work, and he's just been a stalwart and ever-present throughout my life as a fan of horror and other film genres, because Christopher Lee had a lot more going for him than just working in the one genre. So I wanted to do this little vlog now that I'm back to just talk a little bit about some of my favourite Christopher Lee films. And I am going to do, I know I've been saying this for a long time, but I am going to do a complete review and analysis series for the Hammer Horror Dracula films in the same way that I did for the Alien franchise. So consider this just a little stopgap until I do that. But Christopher Lee, for me, was he was a towering figure. When I was a kid, the Hammer Horror films were hugely influential on me. They had a big influence on my nighttime fears, and those are the things which stay with people throughout their lives, the things that solidify certain fears as children. And Christopher Lee's portrayal of Dracula was certainly one of them. One of the reasons was that Hammer Horror films by that point, they were shown often, they were shown regularly, and my dad was a big fan of them, so we would sit and watch them together. They would also be on, I'm sure I remember some Hammer Horror films being on at really strange times, like not early in the day, but you know, way before the Watershed and stuff like that, even when I was a kid. I don't know if that actually was the case, or I'm just misremembering things. But those films had an impact on me. They really created my love for vampiric lore. Well, helped solidify it because I'd read the book Dracula as well, and the dynamic between Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, they really, like, as a kid I think it's important to watch films and hear stories where evil and good are easily identifiable, and in the figures of Van Helsing, played by Peter Cushing, and Christopher Lee playing Dracula, they perfectly summed up evil and good. And I think that was a really important thing for me as a kid. Not that you don't learn these things in other ways, but I think that some of the things that we're exposed to when we're kids can help at least solidify that idea in our heads of what a hero is and what a villain is. Also, Christopher Lee, in his portrayal of Dracula, he played him in an incredibly powerful way, and it was a real shame that later on in the Dracula series he doesn't really get much dialogue. When he first enters the scene at the beginning of Dracula, also known as the Horror of Dracula in America, he's standing at this staircase and he just walks down the staircase, and we realise instantly we're dealing with a different animal compared to Bela Lugosi's Dracula from the Universal series, as much as I love that as well. He has a good bit of dialogue at the start of that film actually, and if you watch the later films then you probably will be surprised at how much dialogue he has in the first movie. He also made two Dracula films, I think Dracula and Son, which was a French film, and there was a film Dracula in the 1970s, which might have been Italian, where forgive me if I get that wrong, where they try to do a more authentic interpretation of Dracula. And even when they tried to replace Christopher Lee because he didn't really want to play Dracula anymore in Dracula, The Brides of Dracula. And Baron Meinster is great in that film, but he's no Christopher Lee. It was unfortunate as well that Christopher Lee didn't return for The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. That's a bit of a spoiler, but Dracula turns up at one point, and I think originally they tried to get Christopher Lee to reprise his role, but instead they got Christopher Lee light. They got someone who looked mildly like Christopher Lee to play the part. So that's the Dracula films. Obviously they had a huge impact on me. My love of horror in a lot of ways comes from those Hammer films and not just the Dracula movies. Christopher Lee also played the Mummy, he played Frankenstein's monster, and he did them all to brilliant effect. There's other Hammer films as well that he plays in. He plays a number of different characters, but the one that is actually my favourite, and I watched it not that long ago, when Christopher Lee passed away, I went over to Mum and Dad's and I sat one afternoon with my dad and we put The Devil Rides Out on and we had a couple of beers and sort of toasted Christopher Lee, and it was nice. And we watched The Devil Rides Out, which is based on a Dennis Wheatley novel. And Christopher Lee played Duke de Richelieu in it. And that character is, especially the opening 10 minutes of it, The Devil Rides Out, you can see how Christopher Lee could have easily played James Bond, because he plays it, so he's so sophisticated, he's so confident, he has an air of real wisdom about him, but he also has this cool aspect to his character, especially at the start of that film when he's at this dinner party and he suspects that all the people that are there are devil worshippers, and he's wandering slowly between all the different guests, just listening in to different bits of conversation so that he can try and assess what they're really up to. It's a great film. I thoroughly recommend it. It's one of Hammer's best, actually. The cast are fantastic, and there's a whole section of the film where they're in this protective magic circle and these curses keep getting sent to bombard them to try and break into the circle, and it's really well done. But Christopher Lee really plays, he shows as well how he would have been an excellent Van Helsing as well, Christopher Lee. So that's The Devil Rides Out. I thoroughly recommend that. It's one of the Hammer films that it's stuck in my mind throughout the years. And obviously he's done a lot of other stuff outside of Hammer. He's done some other horror stuff. The Wicker Man, some people rate that as the greatest horror film of all time. I'm not sure if I would put it there, but it's definitely up there. Some people would say it's not even horror, but I think it is. I think it's a bizarre, folkloric horror musical detective story. It's difficult to describe The Wicker Man in a concise way. And Christopher Lee played Lord Summerisle in that film, and he was again really commanding. He seemed to be very good at relaying this aristocratic appearance in the way he spoke and the way he carried himself, and that's definitely true of The Wicker Man as well, and really frightening as well, especially when, I hope this isn't much of a spoiler, but especially considering the different cults that we see throughout our society today, and how a charismatic figure can can really easily influence people, and that's kind of what Lord Summerisle does at one point in the film. But when we go away from the horror genre, I think one of the problems was that he was pigeonholed, and maybe he didn't like Dracula for a long time because of that, which is a shame. But he did an awful lot outside of horror, and I would say he was equally as successful. And in fact, for younger generations, as if you're all manufactured, for younger generations, Christopher Lee is probably better known as Saruman from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, or sextuplet, is that even a word? The 6 Peter Jackson films. Who he played Saruman in those films. It was lovely seeing him come back for the Hobbit movies as well, but I think the best of those movies for me is The Fellowship of the Ring. It stands head and shoulders above all the rest. It's all about character and atmosphere. It's not so much about action, but it's got great action set pieces in it as well. But Saruman was really really deceptive in that film, and I think Lee captured Saruman as a character perfectly, and especially that first one, he had a bit more to do. He had quite a lot to do in The Two Towers as well. Sadly, they cut his part out of Return of the King, and I think that angered him quite a bit, but they put it back in for the extended versions. We didn't get to see the Scouring of the Shire, which is a shame because it's a really good bit in the book towards the end, and Saruman plays a really important part in that, but we never got, Peter Jackson never made that part of the Lord of the Rings. No doubt with the inevitable remake, we'll get to see that at some point. So his Christopher Lee's portrayal of Saruman was excellent, and even then, I mean, I think he was in, I'm trying to think how old he would have been when they first shot the Fellowship of the Ring. He was probably was in his late 70s at the very least, possibly in his early 80s, and he just commands the screen whenever he's in that film. I think he really wanted to play Gandalf, and I think that he would have been an excellent Gandalf as well. It's one thing, we always get to see Christopher Lee's portrayal of evil in films, but I think he was a very kind person by all accounts, and very fun to be around, and it would have been nice to have seen that in more films, although we did see them in a few. Younger generations will also know him as Count Dooku in the Star Wars prequels. I'm not a fan of the Star Wars prequels. I think the third one is okay, but I rewatched some of it recently, and it felt a lot worse than I remembered it being. However, Count Dooku is excellent. Christopher Lee is a brilliant villain in that as well. And he's also obviously worked with people like Tim Burton as well, and he's just he was always there. He was always there. He's just an actor that's constantly there. And not long before he died, I was watching a video. It was like the last piece of footage with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. I keep saying Peter Cushing for some reason. Peter Cushing. He's one of my favourite actors as well. Why would I get his name wrong? There was this lovely, it was like a news item, and I think it was when Peter Cushing turned a certain age, and Christopher Lee was there with them, and they were talking away, and you could tell there was a great love between them. There's also a great video on YouTube of, because Christopher Lee had a YouTube channel, and I used to watch the videos on it, and they were great, and he would promote like a lot of his heavy metal records and things like that he would work on, because he was an operatic singer, and he got a second lease of life when he was asked by a bunch of heavy metal musicians to contribute to different records and things like that. And I think that by all accounts they were very popular. I've listened to some of them, bits and pieces, but you know, so he had that. I think he spoke like 12 languages as well, 7 of them completely fluent, or you know, it's something along those lines. But it's quite amazing. You can find interviews online where he's speaking in different languages, and it's really incredible. He was in the precursor to the SAS as well. There's still certain things that he well, we couldn't tell him now, but that he wasn't able to tell people because he was still sworn to secrecy, things that happened during the war, as part of that unit. In fact, he told a story about how there's a part in Return of the King, well, extended version, where Saruman gets stabbed in the back, and Peter Jackson was directing Christopher Lee and telling him how to act, and Christopher Lee said, "Look, have you stabbed the man in the back?" Oh no, he never said that. He said, "Have you heard the noise that comes out of someone when he gets stabbed in the back?" And Peter Jackson was like, "Well, no." And Christopher Lee said, "Well, I have." And it's not a scream, it's you let out air, basically. So read into that how you want. But yeah, so he seemed like an incredible guy, the type of guy that you really would want to be, because he's done so many things, he's achieved so much in his life, which I always find really inspiring. People that manage to excel at more than one thing. It's one thing to find your niche, but it's another to be able to achieve great things in a number of domains. But yeah, so I was just really, really sad when I heard that he'd passed away, and I'm sure the horror community in particular have really felt it. like I say, me and my dad felt it enough that we had a Christopher Lee afternoon and toasted him, and so he's left behind a great legacy. And I will be doing more videos on some of the films that he's made over the years. I know there's movies that he's made that are great that I've not even mentioned in this video, but this is just a little impromptu vlog about someone who I greatly admired and had a big influence on me, because, you know, I'm such a huge fan of his work. Anyway, so I'm going to go. I'll be back in the next video. Check out the Facebook page and all that stuff down below, and please do let me know what your favourite Christopher Lee films are, and if you have any memories of him, any thoughts on his work and what he achieved, just leave them in a comment below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.
Brains. Brains. Num 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 num.
While I was away on my self-imposed movie review exile, a sad thing happened. Sir Christopher Lee passed away, and he's an actor that I've always really consider this just a little stopgap until I do that. But Christopher Lee, for me, was he was a towering figure. When I was a kid, the Hammer horror films were hugely influential. To just talk a little bit about some of my favourite Christopher Lee films, and I am going to do, I know I've been saying this for a long time, but I am going to do a complete review and analysis series for the Hammer horror Dracula films in the same way that I did for the Alien franchise. So on me, they had a big influence on my nighttime fears, and those are the things which stay with people throughout their lives, the things that solidify certain fears as you know, as children. And Christopher Lee's portrayal of Dracula was certainly one of them. I admired, loved his work, and he's just been a stalwart and ever present throughout my life as a fan of horror and other film genres, because Christopher Lee had a lot more going for him than just working in the one genre. So I wanted to do this little vlog now that I'm back.